What happens after MI5 gets a surveillance warrant? Authority tone, UK-focused, no sensationalism, and written to avoid giving how to evade surveillance cues. When people hear MI5 got a surveillance warrant, they imagine something immediate. A phone is tapped. An agent is watching. A suspect is being followed. But the real question is, what actually happens after a warrant is approved? Because in the UK, a surveillance warrant isn't just a permission slip, it's the start of a tightly controlled operational process, with rules, safeguards, and constant oversight. So in this video, we'll walk through what typically happens next. Not myths, not spy movie fantasies, just the real-world sequence in plain English. First, a key point. A warrant doesn't mean MI5 can do anything. A warrant is specific. It defines what type of surveillance is authorised, who the target is, what purpose it serves, usually national security, and what limits apply. That matters, because the operational plan has to match the scope of the warrant. If the warrant is for interception of communications, the process looks different than if it's for communications data, physical surveillance, or equipment interference. But the broad structure is similar. Step 1. The warrant becomes a controlled operational task. Once the warrant is approved under the UK's double lock process, it becomes an official tasking. That means it is logged, it is assigned, and it is handled under strict internal compliance procedures. At this point, MI5 is not improvising. They are executing a legally authorised operation with defined objectives. Those objectives are usually questions like, what is this person planning? Who are they connected to? Is there a credible threat? Is a hostile state involved? Is a crime being prepared? In other words, it's about answering specific intelligence questions. Step 2. Technical implementation begins. If the warrant involves communications interception, implementation typically requires technical enablement. In the UK, this does not mean MI5 personally hacks a phone in a movie-style scene. In many cases, lawful interception relies on cooperation from communications service providers under legal obligations and regulated processes. The details vary depending on what is authorised. Intercepting live communications, accessing stored communications, or obtaining communications data such as metadata, but the principle is the same. Collection methods must match what the warrant allows. This is where people often misunderstand. Even after the warrant exists, the agencies still have to follow technical and procedural controls, and the use of that warrant is subject to oversight. Step 3. Collection produces raw material, not answers. Let's be clear. Surveillance produces data. It does not automatically produce clarity. In real operations, the initial output is often messy. Partial context, fragments, ambiguous signals, irrelevant chatter, and large volumes of information. So the next phase is triage. What matters? What is noise? What is actionable? This is where intelligence work becomes less like watching and more like analysis. Step 4. Analysts translate surveillance into intelligence. After collection, trained analysts and case officers start building structure. They may be looking for patterns of contact, changes in behaviour, unusual activity, linkages to known networks, financial indicators, travel indicators, or escalation indicators. This is not about voyeurism, it's about building an intelligence picture. Think of it like assembling a puzzle where many pieces are missing and some pieces are from the wrong box. Step 5. Minimization and handling rules apply. Here's another part many people don't know. Even when surveillance is authorised, there are handling rules around privacy and relevance. The UK system includes requirements around necessity and proportionality, not just at authorisation, but during use. That means there are rules on retention, rules on who can access what, rules on how sensitive material is handled, and controls around what can be disseminated. If information is not relevant to the purpose of the warrant, it is not supposed to be treated the same way as relevant intelligence. This is part of how the UK attempts to prevent surveillance powers from becoming uncontrolled. Step 6. If it's serious, it becomes a joint operation. MI5 does not arrest people. If surveillance reveals a credible threat, MI5 typically works with law enforcement, particularly counter-terror policing. The operational model often becomes MI5 develops intelligence, police prepare operational action, and the Crown Prosecution Service later considers prosecution, depending on the case. This is important. There is often a tension between stopping a threat early and gathering enough evidence to prosecute. Sometimes the priority is disruption, sometimes it's prosecution, sometimes it's both. But that decision depends on risk, timing, and legal realities. Step 7. Options after a warrant include disruption, not just observation. A surveillance warrant does not mean MI5 wants to watch forever. Surveillance is often used to enable outcomes. Possible outcomes include confirming or disproving a threat, mapping a network, identifying accomplices, preventing an imminent attack, or supporting a police intervention. Sometimes surveillance results in no escalation because the suspicion turns out to be unfounded or less serious than initially believed. That's also a real outcome. Surveillance is often used precisely because the agencies don't yet know what's real. Step 8. Warrants are time-limited and reviewed. Surveillance doesn't run indefinitely by default. Warrants have time limits and renewal processes. Renewals require justification. That means MI5 must show continued necessity and proportionality if they want to extend surveillance. And because of the oversight model, agencies can't simply renew out of habit. In serious cases, renewals happen, but they must be defended within the legal framework. Step 9. Oversight does not stop after approval. A major misconception is that approval is the only point where oversight exists. In the UK, oversight continues through auditing, inspections, compliance checks, and external oversight bodies. If errors occur, including misuse, overcollection, or procedural mistakes, they can be flagged, reported, and corrected. And individuals also have a route to complain via the Investigatory Powers Tribunal if they believe unlawful surveillance has occurred. That doesn't mean the system is perfect, but it does mean the process is not a black box with no accountability. Step 10. The most important thing surveillance does is reduce uncertainty. People assume surveillance is about certainty. In reality, surveillance is often about reducing uncertainty. Before a warrant, you might have fragments of intelligence, reports from partners, bits of data, hints of intent. After a warrant, you're trying to answer, is this real? How serious is it? Is it escalating? Who else is involved? What timeline are we dealing with? That is why surveillance exists. It's a tool for decision-making under risk. So, what happens after MI5 gets a surveillance warrant? In plain terms, the operation becomes formally tasked. Technical collection is implemented under the scope of the warrant. Data is triaged, analysed, and structured into intelligence. Handling and privacy controls continue to apply. If the threat is serious, intelligence is coordinated with policing and operational partners, and oversight continues through the life cycle of the warrant. That's the real sequence, not instant spy magic. A legal and operational pipeline designed to protect national security while remaining constrained by law.